The Lioness and the Dragon, a story of two queens. There is in us an instinct for newness, for renewal, for a liberation of creative power. We seek to awaken in ourselves a force which really changes our lives from within, and yet the same instinct tells us that this change is a recovery of that which is deepest, most original, most personal in our lives. To be born again is not to become somebody else, but to become ourselves. Thomas Merton. George R. R. Martin has said in an interview that one of the reasons he was upset about having to split A Feast for Crows and A Dance for Dragons is Cersei and Daenerys won't be able to be directly compared and contrasted. Cersei and Daenerys are intended as parallel characters, each exploring a different approach to how a woman would rule in a male dominated medieval inspired fantasy world. I believe that in The Winds of Winter, Cersei and Daenerys will continue their journey as foils of one another, leading to a major event in The Winds of Winter. Daenerys and Cersei. Two queens on a journey in a world in which men dominate. How are they alike? How are they different? What are we supposed to take away from their characters? What are their arcs supposed to teach us about womanhood, patriarchy, and the status quo? Chapter 1. Women have always been monsters. Female sexuality was insatiable. If given free rein, women would seduce the devil himself and use their resulting satanic powers to enslave mortal men. This quote is from the book Dead Blondes and Bad Mothers by Jude Doyle, and I will continue to use quotes from this book to illustrate many points. There's no coincidence that this is exactly what exiled slavers say of Daenerys. They say her lust cannot be sated, that she mates with men, women, eunuchs, even dogs and children, and woe betide the lover who fails to satisfy her. She gives her body to men to take their souls in thrall. This is also something said of women in power regularly to disparage them. Cleopatra, an inspiration for Daenerys' character, suffered from similar rumors. A 4th century CE author of a capsule biography of the queen said, Cleopatra, daughter of Ptolemy, king of the Egyptians, defeated by Ptolemy, her brother and husband, whom she wished to cheat of the kingdom, came to Caesar in Alexandria in the midst of civil war. She obtained Ptolemy's kingdom and his death from Caesar through her beauty and sex. She was so lustful that she often prostituted herself, so beautiful that many men purchased a night with her at the cost of their life. It's worth noting that Cleopatra was not actually considered very beautiful by scholars. Most attribute her abilities to her intelligence, charm, and wit, but she wasn't well liked by the Romans, so propaganda, had to happen. The reason the Roman image of Cleopatra persisted was because it enforced traditional and cultural ideas and fears about men worrying that women could control their own lives and their sexuality in order to usurp the roles of men. You see this sort of slander in the current day as well. She slept her way to the top. Of course, there's no way a woman could actually be intelligent and rise through the ranks via her own skills and merit. A man must have given her that position. Stories about monsters make things very clear. The monster, the thing that exists outside of our acceptable roles and definitions, must be killed, or the system will collapse. The dragon will burn the village, the whore of Babylon will mount the beast, and the abominations born of her lust will devour the world. In Daenerys' case, she is the monster that must be put down. The lustful queen who carries a golden chalice full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. She appears drunk on the blood of saints, covered in jewels, and riding a scarlet beast with 7 heads. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of earth. This, of course, is a fundamental misunderstanding of Daenerys' character. Not only her character, but also the role of her dragons, reduced to mindless monsters who mean nothing but destruction. They do mean more than that, but I'll get into that later. At the end of Dance, there exists a conversation that Dany must choose between being Misa or being the mother of dragons. She cannot be both. And people who say this make me think of how society is very obsessed with binaries and something or someone having to be one specific way. That you cannot be multifaceted. You are either a monster or a mother. That is a dichotomy of being a woman in fiction and in real life. Are you the Madonna or are you the whore? Are you the evil stepmother or the saint like mother? Are you good or are you evil? Where is the room for nuance? There is a need for people to put all characters in boxes like this, but it exists very much for women and girls in fiction. A quote from Boz Meadows encapsulates this to me. We think of men as anti heroes, as capable of occupying an intense and fascinating moral gray area, of being able to fall and rise and fall again, but still be worthy of love on some fundamental level. Because if it was the world and its failings that broke them, then we must surely owe them some sympathy. But women aren't allowed to be broken by the world. Or if we are, it's the breaking that makes us villains. Wronged women turn into avenging furies, inhuman and monstrous, and once we cross the dark side, we become adversaries to be defeated, not lost souls in need of mending. Which is what happens when you let benevolent sexism invest you in the idea that women are humanity's moral guardians and men its native renegades. Because if female goodness is only ever an inherent quality, something we're born with and to be, then once lost, it must necessarily be lost forever, a severed limb we can't regrow. Whereas male goodness, by virtue of being an acquired quality, something bestowed through the kindness of women, earned through right action and learned through struggle, can just as necessarily be gained and lost multiple times without being tarnished, like a jewel we might pawn in hardship and later reclaim. Daenerys is the mother of dragons, and she is Misa. One cannot exist without the other. She cannot become the Misa who the freedmen love without becoming the mother of dragons. How does she free her children without her dragons? In a way, Dany is the whore of Babylon bringing the apocalypse. If you look at the definition, Old English apoxylum via Old French and ecclesial Latin from Greek apocalypsis from apocalyptian means to uncover and reveal. So the slayer of lies is uncovering the lies of the slayers who are a part of a slave coalition who are secretly waiting for the Volantene fleet to come to Marine. Once again, the peace in Marine is not real. It is a false peace, a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to the positive peace, which is the presence of justice. For some reason, people think a negative peace that allows for millions of people from all over Planetos to be kidnapped, trafficked, abused, raped, and tortured, and ripped apart from their families is somehow better. A peace in which slaves are forcefully bred to have specific features that the slavers like. A society where girls are put up for auction and their clothes ripped away. The next piece of chattel was already being led up to take their place. A girl, 15 or 16, not off the Selasori Korhan this time. Tyrion did not know her. The same age as Daenerys Targaryen, or near enough. The slaver soon had her naked. At least we were spared that humiliation. This type of peace is better than a war to end slavery. Daenerys was once that girl in Tyrion's chapter, and that is the fire in her belly that makes her say, slavery is not the same as being rained on. I have been rained on and I have been sold. It is not the same. No man wants to be owned. People might reply, but that's outside of Marine. My response to that is two things. One, no one is free unless we are all free. And two, wow, what an F you to all the other enslaved people. Daenerys freed all of Slaver's Bay. For her to go back on that word and return them to bondage would be disgusting. These Yunkish dogs cannot be trusted, your worship. Even now they plot against you. New levies have been raised and can be seen drilling outside the city walls. Warships are being built. Envoys have been sent to Nukius and Volantis in the west to make alliances and hire sellswords. They have even dispatched riders to Vaes Dothrak to bring a Khalasar down upon you. The slavers will not stop until they can reinstate slavery. That has been their goal this entire time. The locust being poisoned is not a coincidence. It's an assassination plot that was thwarted because Drogon sensed Daenerys' distress and her being in danger. Similar to Ghost acting strange before Jon is assassinated by his Night's Watch brothers. The only difference is Ghost was not there to save Jon because Jon locked him up. The slaver coalition has always wanted Dany gone. That's why the rumors spread about her sound so terrible, because they come from exiled slavers. Compare what they say to what the freedmen say about Daenerys. It's very different. Now let's talk about Cersei. It's very easy for people to dismiss Cersei as a shallow, stupid moron, but she's not. Part of the reason readers believe this is that we as readers have far more information than Cersei does. So, for example, when Cersei thinks Tyrion is in the walls, because we know Tyrion is an Essos, it's easy to mock her for her delusion. But from Cersei's perspective, her brother murdered her child and escaped after telling everyone he wished he could kill them all. And the thing is, there are secret passageways in the walls. It's just that Varys is the one who is using them. Same thing with her being paranoid about the Tyrells wanting power. The Tyrells do want power. They're political schemers playing the Game of Thrones. They just do it very well. The Tyrells want to marry Sansa to Willis. They're not doing that out of kindness. They do it because they want Winterfell, and Sansa is the key to that. Unbeknownst to her that her brothers are alive, of course. Kevin himself sees this. The more I give him, the more he wants. Kevin Lannister was beginning to understand why Cersei had grown so resentful of the Tyrells. The issue with Cersei is that she goes about her suspicions in the worst possible way. Also, Cersei is right that people don't take her seriously because she's a woman. The person she is compared to the most in the books is Mad King Aerys, and how long did he get away with all the craziness and paranoia before being killed? There is a base level of truth in Cersei's words. She is just as cruel as Tywin and even employs the same baseless cruelty Tywin does. Tywin is not this great political schemer that the general fandom seems to think he is. What is the political genius behind drowning men, women, and children in mines? What is the political genius in making his father's mistress do a walk of atonement? Where is it when he orders the gang rape of Tysha, a 13-year-old girl? Or when he orders the Mountain and Armory Lords to brutalize and sexually assault Elia and her children? Sure, he tells Tyrion, "You can't possibly think I'd order something that cruel." Really? The same Tywin who ordered a man to rape Tyrion's wife? Over 100 men, actually? And force him and make Tyrion force himself onto Tysha? He does these things because he is cruel and enjoys power and control, and he's a very violent misogynist. Because patriarchy itself is inherently incestuous. It's a system where male authority, ownership, and sexual access to women and girls are blended within the patriarchal family, which then leads to the sexual abuse of girls by fathers, uncles, or brothers. This structure protects male dominance at the expense of women's safety and autonomy. This is done to all the women and girls of the series. Lysa being married off to Jon Arryn, Lyanna to Robert, Cersei by her father, and Daenerys by her brother. We go home with an army, sweet sister, with Khal Drogo's army. That is how we go home. And if you must wed him and bed him for that, you will. He smiled at her. I'd let his whole Khalasar fuck you if need be, sweet sister. All 40,000 men and their horses too, if that is what it would take to get my army. Be grateful it is only Drogo. For patriarchy to work, men have to control literally every facet of sex and family life. Who has sex with whom and when, and whether they get pregnant, who owns the child, and who cares for it. And given the unruly nature of sex and birth, this control is perpetually slipping out of their grasp. Patriarchy is inherently unsustainable. It is not possible to control another being at every moment of every day. It is not possible to control what or who women want. Tywin himself does this to Cersei when he wants her to remarry despite her not wanting to. He says she's still young as she's in her 30s. And he's right, she is young. So why doesn't he apply this logic to himself? His own wife Joanna died when he was in his 30s. So why didn't he remarry since he's this political genius? The most political thing to do is to marry somebody. All of Cersei's worst traits come as a result of being raised by Tywin. People act like Cersei was made in this bubble and wasn't raised by the worst person ever. It's like that quote, "My father is the worst person in the world and I am his favorite daughter." Except Cersei isn't his favorite, and because of this, it fucks her up. Now, this isn't to say that Cersei is not responsible for her heinous actions. She is. But the point of this video isn't to put her on trial, it's to understand her. No wonder Cersei has internalized this and is herself filled with internalized misogyny and the same cruelty of Tywin. I actually think Cersei is the most like Tywin, even more than Tyrion. I think Tyrion is much smarter than Tywin ever was. But actually, we should go much further back in Cersei's life to understand her. When we were little, Jaime and I were so much alike that even our Lord Father could not tell us apart. Sometimes as a lark, we would dress in each other's clothes and spend a whole day as each other. Yet even so, when Jaime was given his first sword, there was none for me. What do I get? I remember asking. We were so much alike, I could never understand why they treated us so differently. Jaime learned to fight with sword and lance and mace, while I was taught to smile and sing and please. He was heir to Castle Rock, while I was to be sold to some stranger like a horse, to be ridden whenever my new owner liked, beaten whenever he liked, and cast aside in time for a younger filly. Jaime's lot was to be glory and power, while mine was birth and moonblood. He wanted her. Cersei could see it in the way he looked at her. Men had been looking at her that way since her breast began to bud. Because I was so beautiful, they said. But Jaime was beautiful as well, and they never looked at him that way. When she was small, she would sometimes don her brother's clothing as a lark. She was always startled by how differently men treated her when they thought that she was Jaime, even Lord Tywin himself. Marriage. For much of history, violence was not something unfortunate that happened within marriage. Violence was marriage. It was a brutal institution, the primary mechanism by which men subdued individual women and put their unruly, monstrous sexuality under control. Both Cersei and Daenerys are married to men they don't want to marry. They're married off for the purpose of what all marriages are. Marriage in Westeros is fathers, uncles, and brothers exchanging their female relatives for swords and political power. Because patriarchy has been sold to us as natural, its mechanisms are hard to perceive. It's manifest in the average woman's life as a series of overlapping and interlocking forms of violence, intended to domesticate her wild self into useful breeding stock. Cersei's sexuality is punished in a similar way, i.e., the Walk of Atonement. People think of atonement as the character needing to be depicted suffering pointlessly every step of the way, and not them actually doing things and making the effort to become a better person, which is why the Walk of Atonement is total bullshit, and I'll get more into that later. The only difference between Cersei and Daenerys is that Daenerys has dragons that allow her a level of freedom that Cersei cannot have. This is partially why people dismiss the abuse of Cersei faces from Robert. Cersei's evil. She deserves it. But Robert isn't beating her or raping her because of her heinous actions. Which, by the way, even if he was, that is a crazy way to respond. He's doing it because this is a society that sees no fault in this, and because it makes him feel strong. The wrong man came back from the Trident, the queen would sometimes think as he was plowing her. For Robert, those nights never happened. Come morning, he remembered nothing, or so he would have her believe. Once, during the first year of their marriage, Cersei had voiced her displeasure with him the next day. You hurt me, she complained. He had the grace to look ashamed. It was not me, my lady, he said in a sulky, sullen tone, like a child caught stealing apple cakes from the kitchen. It was the wine. I drink too much wine. To wash down his admission, he reached for his horn of ale and he raised it to his mouth. She smashed her own horn into his face so hard he chipped a tooth. The rest had been all lies, though. He did remember what he did to her at night. She was convinced of that. She could see it in his eyes. He only pretended to forget. It was easier to do that than to face his shame. Deep down, Robert Baratheon was a coward. In time, the assaults did grow less frequent. During the first year, he took her at least once a fortnight. By the end, it was not even once a year. He never stopped completely, though. Sooner or later, there was always come the night when he would drink too much and want to claim his rights. What shamed him in the light of day gave him pleasure in the darkness. Robert's face was dark with anger. How many times must I tell you to hold your tongue, woman? Cersei's face was a study in contempt. What a jape the gods have made of us two, she said. By all rights, you ought to be in skirts and me in mail. Purple with rage, the king lashed out, a vicious backhand blow to the side of her head. She stumbled against the table and fell hard. Yet Cersei Lannister did not cry out. Her slender fingers brushed her cheek, where the pale, smooth skin was already reddening. On the morrow, the bruise would cover half her face. I shall wear this with a badge of honor, she announced. Wear it in silence, or I'll honor you again, Robert vowed. He shouted for a guard. Sir Meryn Trant stepped into the room, tall and somber in his white armor. The queen is tired. See her to her bedchamber. The knight helped Cersei to her feet and led her out without a word. Robert reached for a flagon and refilled his cup. You see what she does to me, Ned? The king seated himself, cradling his wine cup. My loving wife, the mother of my children. The rage was gone from him now. In his eyes, Ned saw something sad and scared. I should not have hit her. That was not kingly. He stared down at his hands as if he did not quite know what they were. I was always strong. No one could stand before me. No one. How do you fight someone if you can't hit them? Wow, Robert. Cersei threatened your masculinity in front of your bro, Ned. Can't have that happen. Let's slap her to show her her place and then get all sad to make up for the fact that you're a loser who peaked in high school. Insert a Robert explosion right now. Thank you. Robert slander aside, he does this to remind her of her place in society. I, the man, am above you. You, the woman, are beneath me. Not only that, but it allows him to feel strong after becoming a useless drunk. Even Lyanna clocked that he was a bum. Is it any wonder that the very first line of her very first POV is, she dreamt she sat the Iron Throne, high above them all. Cersei craves the power and autonomy that she has been denied. In some ways, she tries to take this power back. The most blatant one is never having Robert's children. 10,000 of your children perished in my palm, your grace, she thought, slipping a third finger into mirror. While you snored, I would lick your sons off my face and fingers, one by one. All those pale, sticky princes. You claimed your rights, my lord, but in the darkness I would eat your heirs. Taina gave a shudder. She gasped some words in a foreign tongue, then shuddered again and arched her back and screamed. She sounds as if she's being gored, the queen thought. For a moment, she let herself imagine that the fingers were a boar's tusks, ripping the Mirish woman apart from groin to throat. I've seen jokes about the Mirror Swamp chapter, and I genuinely don't understand it. People say George is bad at sex scenes because the scene isn't sexy or sensual, but it's not supposed to be. Cersei spends this chapter thinking about how Robert abused her and hurt her, and she recreates the situation with Taina. A scene in which you are recreating your own assault isn't supposed to be sexy. It's supposed to be heartbreaking. And it is, because at the end of her tryst with Taina, not only does she say the same exact words as Robert, she comes to the realization that it gave her no pleasure. So, how could Robert have gotten pleasure from hurting her all those years? Chapter 2, Walking Wounds. Let's talk about brothers. Some old wounds never truly heal and bleed again at the slightest word. Both Cersei and Daenerys have brothers who occupy this role of the chivalric knight. Respect that is afforded to them by virtue of just their gender. They're the most important thing you can be in Westeros, an able bodied masculine fighter. But the way they differ is Daenerys is allowed room to maneuver around Rhaegar's shadow as he is dead. He dies to make way for Daenerys' story. And this is true for all the men in Daenerys' story. Her father, her brothers, her husband, her son, they all die so that she does not get fridged for their story. It's kind of dark woke if you think about it. She takes his place as the chivalric heroic knight meant to save the world, whereas Jaime is someone that Cersei cannot escape, especially as her twin. Jaime is a mirror for Cersei, but also a window into a life that Cersei can never have. Seeing him and sleeping with him allows her to somewhat live through him, but he's also like a walking wound from her. Every step he takes is a reminder that she can't live that life. She'll never wield a blade. In this case, the blade is a phallic looking weapon, so in a way, she'll never wield a penis and the power that comes with it. And just like that, the wound never heals or closes. It's constantly bleeding, that she's not allowed to live like that. In some ways, Rhaegar is also a walking wound for Daenerys. She's always wondering, is this what Rhaegar would have done? Luckily for Daenerys, George loves killing men around her so she doesn't get fridged. Truly a girl in men's fields. Queenship in Dance versus Feast. Thrones. Thrones, like crowns and swords, are symbols. They represent something. More importantly, they represent you as a leader. Jon Snow has Longclaw, a bastard sword with its pommel being ghost, sigil of House Stark, and a symbol of the old gods due to ghost coloring. Visenya has Dark Sister. She's seen as the austere sorceress involved in dark arts and willing to do the hard things to make sure her family is safe. You will also see this description matches Bloodraven, who also wielded Dark Sister. Brienne has Oathkeeper, etc., etc. So let's look at how Daenerys and Cersei's relationships to these symbols can show us how they view leadership and duty and also their personalities. What does the throne mean to each of them? Power versus duty. She dreamt she sat the Iron Throne, high above them all. The courtiers were brightly colored mice below. Great lords and proud ladies knelt before her. Bold young knights laid their swords at her feet and pleaded for her favors, and the queen smiled down at them. Now, for Cersei, what's clear here to me is her desire for power, recognition, and love. She sees the throne as something owed to her after years of playing the role she was forced into. It's the final reward after all the suffering she's experienced. The rule was hers. Cersei did not mean to give it up until Tommen came of age. I waited, so can he. I waited half my life. She had played the dutiful daughter, the blushing bride, the pliant wife. She had suffered Robert's drunken groping, Jamie's jealousy, Renly's mockery, Varys with his titters, Stannis endlessly grinding his teeth. She had contended with Jon Arryn, Ned Stark, and her vile, treacherous, murderous dwarf brother, all the while promising herself that one day it would be her turn. If Marjorie Tyrell thinks to cheat me of my hour in the sun, she had bloody well think again. Even Cersei's position in the throne room speaks to her role in society. She cannot sit on the Iron Throne. She always sits beneath it in a chair. It's worth noting that the only women who have ever sat on the Iron Throne were Visenya and Rhaenys the Conquerors. They're also the only women to have been able to pass legislature on their own with no need to run things by Aegon. Even Alysanne had to convince Jaehaerys to end the right of the First Night and make it so that there was clean water in King's Landing. Now, Let's compare this to Daenerys. Originally, the throne in Meereen was a harpy throne that Daenerys considers an eyesore, so she has it removed and replaced with a simple ebony bench. Daenerys Targaryen had preferred to hold court from a bench of polished ebony, smooth and simple, covered with the cushions that Sir Barristan had found to make her more comfortable. King Hisdar had replaced the bench with two imposing thrones of gilded wood, their tall backs carved into the shape of dragons. The king seated himself in the right hand throne, with a golden crown upon his head and a jeweled scepter in one pale hand. The second throne remained vacant. And while the bench is simple, it's not comfortable. The slippers the Butcher King had sent her had grown too uncomfortable. Dany kicked them off and sat with one foot tucked beneath her and the other swinging back and forth. It was not a very regal pose, but she was tired of being regal. The crown had given her a headache, and her buttocks had gone to sleep. Sir Barristan, she called. I know what quality a king needs most. Courage or grace? Cheeks like iron, she teased. All I do is sit. This makes me think of Aegon the Conqueror's response as to why he made the Iron Throne the way it is. He says, a king should never sit easy. And also, this is a reference to heavy is the head that wears the crown. So her crown gives her a headache, but that is what it means to be queen. To focus more on crowns, let's go into Cersei and Daenerys' crowns. Cersei. She turned to her handmaid. Dorcas, bring my crown, the new one, if you please. It was lighter than the old, pale spun gold set with emeralds that sparkled when she turned her head, as opposed to Daenerys. Eerie fetched her crown, wrought with the shape of the three-headed dragon of her house. Its coils were gold, its wings silver, the three heads ivory, onyx, and jade. Dany's neck and shoulders would be stiff and sore from the weight of it before the day was done. A crown should not sit easy on the head. Reference to her ancestor. Rulership should not be easy or comfortable. Actually, let's look at what George himself said that he sees as a good king. A good king is someone who regards being king as a duty rather than a privilege that they are entitled to. A duty to the realm to dispense justice and peace, and occasionally do boring things like building roads and sanitation in King's Landing and all that. Wow, that's super interesting. I wonder if that describes anybody in the story. I was alone for a long time, Jorah. All alone, but for my brother. I was such a small, scared thing. Viserys should have protected me, but instead he hurt me and scared me worse. He shouldn't have done that. He wasn't just my brother, he was my king. Why do the gods make kings and queens if not to protect the ones who can't protect themselves? Some kings make themselves. Robert did. He was no true king, Dany said scornfully. He did no justice. Justice. That's what kings are for. Daenerys sees it as a duty and is aware of the duty placed on her. That's why she decides to stay in Meereen after her mistakes. She recognizes her duty to her children. Obviously, Daenerys makes mistakes on this journey, but making mistakes doesn't mean you're bad or wrong. It's not supposed to be easy, especially if you're trying to end the institution that is slavery. Rome wasn't built in a day. Her brother is dead and she's the last one left. Even before Viserys dies, she does not view the Iron Throne or any throne as something that she wants. She sees it as hers because her family was usurped, the same way the Starks see Winterfell as theirs after they were usurped. For some reason, only Daenerys faces this criticism for thinking the way literally every noble does. It's a bit funny. Who would ever tell the Starks, well, your claim was taken by conquest, so you're not allowed to want Winterfell back, and you're not allowed to call yourself a wolf because that means you think you're above others? What Daenerys wants above all else is home, the house with the red door. I don't think that Cersei wants home. I think she wants power. And wanting power isn't inherently a bad thing. Wanting power so that you can protect yourself and the people you care about isn't wrong. You need power to enact change. How would Dany enact change without her dragons? Would the Dothraki have followed her if she didn't show the power of magic she showcased? People follow power, and power gives you access not only to change, but to protection. The issue with Cersei is that she's power hungry, but can anyone really blame her when she's been so starved of it her whole life? And this isn't to say that she's the most power starved person. Obviously, she's not a member of the small folk, but within their society of nobles, as a woman, she is lesser. She hated feeling weak. If the gods had given her the strength they gave Jaime and that swaggering oaf Robert, she could have made her own escape. Oh, for a sword and the skill to wield it. She had a warrior's heart, but the gods in their blind malice had given her the feeble body of a woman. I also want to add a caveat that most other male characters also want power and don't get nearly any backlash at all for this. It's very normal for people to want power if they are weak so that they can feel safe. Contrary to popular belief, wanting power does not automatically make you evil. I don't know why people think this. I just don't think that at all. Power is safety for Cersei, and home is safety for Daenerys, but Dany cannot have her home without the power to create it. Next, let's get into decision making as being queen. Men fear women, even as they work to make women fear men, because on the most basic level, male dominance is an illusion. This is why so many men undermine Daenerys and Cersei. Some of it is done unintentionally, but it's just because they don't believe that they should have power. In Dance, some of the freedmen were poisoned, and Skahaz wants to torture the wine seller and his daughters to get information, because obviously, if you're poisoned by wine, the first person you look for is the person who sold the wine. Dany at first refuses, but following the death of another freedman, is angry enough that she decides to allow Skahas to question them sharply, which means torture, but immediately takes the decision back because she recognizes that it's wrong and can only draw false confessions. Cersei does something similar, but she has the blue bard torture in order to get information on Marjorie, and eventually, after being mercilessly tortured, gets a false confession from the blue bard. And she knows it's false, but she doesn't care because it allows her to secure her plan of getting rid of the Tyrells. But what I will add is that Cersei, while capable of cruelty, cannot stomach seeing it. She turned from it. When Cersei sends Phallus Stokeworth to the Black Cells, she walks away hearing her screams and doesn't turn back, but she tries to ignore it. It really makes her uncomfortable. Compare this to Daenerys when they're going through the Lazarene village. She tries to ignore that woman's cries, but she cannot, and she turns back. I'd say the difference is their conscience, but I do believe that Cersei also has a conscience. She's just doing everything in her power to stop a prophecy that tells her that her children will die and that she will be murdered. Now let's look at how they both handle prophecy. With Cersei, the Valancourt prophecy is really the basis for pretty much her entire character. Queen you shall be, until there comes another, younger and more beautiful to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. Will the king and I have children? She asked. Oh, aye, 6 and 10 for him, and 3 for you. Gold shall be their crowns, and gold their shrouds, she said. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valancourt shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. She is desperately trying to stop this, and as her life has gone on, she is aware that it is happening. Robert does have multiple children, and Cersei does have 3 children with 3 golden crowns. But Cersei's paranoia about this prophecy that we know is going to happen makes it self fulfilling. I'm not one of those people who says prophecy doesn't come true in A Song of Ice and Fire because it's not true. It just does in unique ways. Put yourself in Cersei's shoes. So far, everything that Maggie the Frog has said has come true. She did marry the king. He did have a bunch of bastards. She does have 3 children crowned in gold. One of her sons was murdered. So it's only natural that she becomes more and more paranoid as the prophecy continues to become true. Sadly, her paranoia is a self fulfilling prophecy similar to Ares. He thought Rhaegar was planning to depose him, and Rhaegar was. He just acted insane about it. Ah, Cersei. The Oedipus Rex of it all. Now, Daenerys is told so many prophecies, but for now I'll focus on the one that Quaithe tells her. Keep in mind that Quaithe is always showing up to tell her some random prophecy. The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others. Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed Seneschal. But Daenerys doesn't allow herself to be swayed by this. When Resnek and Skahaz appeared, she found herself looking at them askance, mindful of the 3 treasons. Beware the perfume seneschal. She sniffed suspiciously at Resnak Moresnak. I could command the Shave-Pay to arrest him and put him to the question. Would that forestall the prophecy, or would some other betrayer take his place? Prophecies are treacherous, she reminded herself, and Resnak may be no more than he appears. Or, we are an old people. Ancestors are important to us. Wed Hazar Zolorak and make a son with him, a son whose father is the harpy, whose mother is the dragon. In him the prophecies shall be fulfilled, and your enemies will melt away like snow. He shall be the stallion who mounts the world. Dany knew how it went with prophecies. They were made of words, and words were wind. Both Cersei and Daenerys worry about prophecy, but Daenerys does not allow it to take over her life in the way that Cersei does. And granted, Cersei's prophecy is more like, if you don't, this is, you're gonna die, and your kids are gonna die. Whereas for Daenerys, it's like, beware of the people, which is a little easier. I look at prophecies like a circle, like a self fulfilling circle, that they are inevitable. And really, there's nothing you can do to stop it. You just need to live your life. Sadly, Cersei is not just gonna let that happen. We have these 2 women, and honestly, it's a woman and a girl because Cersei is a woman, but Daenerys is a girl. She's like 15, who are paralleled but also foils. Both mothers have 3 children, but whereas Cersei will lose her children, Dany will reclaim hers come winds. Both of their adversaries are religious figures represented by birds who impose the gendered roles onto them, the High Sparrow for Cersei and the Green Grace, who I believe is the Harpy for Daenerys. The High Sparrow tells Cersei what I said earlier about Cleopatra by the Roman scholar and what is said about Daenerys by the slavers. These are common sins, he said. The wickedness of widows is well known, and all women are wantons at heart, given to using their wiles and beauty to work their wills on men. There is no treason here, so long as you did not stray from your marriage bed whilst his grace King Robert was alive. Now, Cersei does use her looks and wiles to get men to do things for her, but let's not act like the High Sparrow is saying this out of his good heart. He's just a misogynist. For Daenerys, the basing comes in the form of her wedding to Hisdar. I have no wish to give offense, but I will not present myself naked to Hisdar's mother and sisters. But, said Resnek, blinking, but you must, your worship. Before a marriage, it is traditional for the woman of the man's house to examine the bride's womb and, her female parts to ascertain that they are well formed and, fertile. Magnificence, you do not understand, protested Raznak. The washing of the feet is hallowed by tradition. It signifies that you shall be your husband's handmaid. The wedding garb is fraught with meaning, too. The bride is dressed in dark red veils above a tokar of white silk, fringed with baby pearls. The queen of rabbits must not be wed without her floppy ears. All those pearls will make me rattle when I walk. The pearls symbolize fertility. The more pearls your worship wears, the more healthy children she will bear. They both want them to debase themselves in order to keep the status quo. Your sexuality does not belong to you, it belongs to your husband. You don't belong to you, you belong to your husband. Sadly, Cersei cannot escape this and ends up having to go through the Walk of Atonement, but Daenerys luckily escapes. You can see Cersei's Walk of Atonement as she is naked and bald as her version of Daenerys emerging from the pyre naked and bald. That is how she is reborn. But as Cersei is Daenerys' foil, this is a twisted version of this. Daenerys willingly walks into the pyre to be reborn. Cersei is forced into this, and it's done to humiliate her. The Septa shave her everywhere, even her genital hair, which I think goes even further into wanting her to appear as virginal for her sins of not being the Madonna and instead being the whore. My crown, the queen thought. They took the other crown from me and now they are stealing this one as well. To circle back, I made an earlier comment about how patriarchy being inherently incestuous and how this structure protects male dominance at the expense of women's safety and autonomy. Now let's look at this quote from Kevin after Cersei's Walk of Atonement. His niece had been subdued and submissive since her Walk of Atonement. Thank the gods. The novices who attended her reported that she spent a third of her waking hours with her son, another third in prayer, and the rest in the tub. She was bathing 4 or 5 times a day, scrubbing herself with horsehair brushes and strong lye soap, as if she meant to scrape her skin off. She will never wash the stain away, no matter how hard she scrubs. Sir Kevin remembered the girl she had once been, so full of life and mischief, and when she flowered, ah, had there ever been a maid so sweet to look upon? That's certainly an interesting way to think of your niece who you saw grow up. There is a passage in the play Medea by Euripides that encapsulates Cersei to me. Of all things which are living and can form a judgment, we women are the most unfortunate creatures. Firstly, with an excess of wealth, it is required for us to buy a husband and take for our bodies a master, for not to take one is even worse. And now the question is serious whether we take a good or a bad one, for there is no easy escape for a woman, nor can she say no to her marriage. She arrives among new modes of behavior and manners, and needs prophetic power unless she has learnt at home how best to manage him who shares the bed with her. And if we work out all this well and carefully, and the husband lives with us and lightly bears his yoke, then life is enviable. If not, I'd rather die. A man, when he's tired of the company in his home, goes out of the home and puts an end to his boredom and turns to a friend or companion of his own age. But we are forced to keep our eyes on one alone. What they say of us is that we have a peaceful time living at home while they do the fighting in war. How wrong they are. I would very much rather stand 3 times in the front of battle than bear one child. The lioness strikes to kill. All of what has happened to Cersei will lead to what I believe will happen in Winds, which is she will blow up King's Landing. The deaths of her children, the scorn she faced during her Walk of Atonement, every single second of misogyny and abuse she faced will lead to this moment. So Cersei may be a monster, but it was the society that turned her into that. She was not born evil. She is a product of a world where women and girls are less than and used. I am nothing now on my own, but often I have seen the female nature in this way. That is, we are nothing. As young girls in our father's home, we live, I believe, the sweetest life among all mortals, as unawareness always makes children grow up in bliss. But when we reach adolescence and become aware, we are pushed out and sold, away from our ancestral gods and from our parents. Some to foreign men, some to barbarians, some into joyless homes, some into homes full of abuse. And these things, when a single night has yoked us, we have to praise and consider as good. Let her be the queen of ashes. They think that this will break my pride, that it will make an end of me, but they are wrong. The wildfire was cleansing her, burning away all her rage and fear and filling her with resolve. She's waited her whole life. She played the brushing bride, the pliant wife, the dutiful daughter. Jaime, as a result of burning Cersei's letter, won't be there to stop her the way he was able to stop Ares. Even in the baleful glow, Cersei had been beautiful to look upon. She stood with one hand on her breast, her lips parted, her green eyes shining. She is crying, Jaime had realized, but whether it was from grief or ecstasy, he could not have said. The sight had filled him with disquiet, reminding him of Ares Targaryen and the way a burning would arouse him. Now, I'm going to say something that may be a bit controversial, but I think Dany in Dance could have learned a thing or two from Cersei. In Dance, I believe that while she has good intentions, she's too passive and is making too many concessions with slavers. But this is something that she will rectify in Winds. I believe the Daenerys and Winds will burn down the black walls of Volantis that keep in the old blood, while Cersei in Westeros burns King's Landing. In A Song of Ice and Fire, I believe that there are two types of fire: wildfire and dragonfire. Wildfire represents death, destruction, and all consuming fire. Think Amaterasu from Naruto. While dragonfire is also capable of death and destruction, it has also been used to symbolize birth, regrowth, and liberation. Volantis is described to be crumbling, and the widow of Waterfront has told Tyrion very explicitly what the enslaved want from Daenerys. Should you reach your queen, give her a message from the slaves of old Volantis. She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek where her tears had been cut away. Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon. Daenerys and Cersei are like sisters to me, which is what makes me want to compare them to two sisters from the past. So let's get into Sumerian mythology, folks. I want to talk about Daenerys as Ishtar or Inanna, depending on if it's Sumerian or Babylonian, and Cersei as Eresh Kagal. Ishtar is an ancient Sumerian goddess of love, fertility, and war. She is known for her paradoxical nature as being both a nurturing figure and a fierce, sometimes vengeful warrior. She's known as a great mother goddess, worshipped in threefold capacity of the goddess of fertility and vegetation, as the goddess of war, and as the goddess of love. She was an independent deity, allowing no allegiance to a husband and standing on equal footing of equality with the gods. But this was because she had once been chief subject of Sumerian worship, the spirit of the evening star. In the Sumerian language, there was no gender, nothing that could distinguish the goddess or the woman from the god or the man, and the spirits, therefore indifferently of both sexes. Moreover, the woman occupied an important place in the Sumerian family. Where the Semitic translation speaks of man and woman, the Sumerian original makes it woman and man. To the Sumerian mind, accordingly, the female spirit was as powerful as the male, acting independently and possessing the same attributes. She is also often spoken of as the daughter of the moon. Now, Eresh Kagal is the goddess of the underworld. She is Inanna's elder sister, one who was once experienced joy and marriage as the goddess of grain, but now is cast into obscurity as a neglected widow. Rather than birthing children for her husband, she must take the souls of the dead into herself by swallowing them. In the dismal netherworld, she is perpetually cut off from her grain and blossoms above. With only clay to eat and dirty water to drink, she becomes hopeless and lightless as the miserable kingdom she now rules. She has become a huge, sleeping, black-skinned, naked woman living in the empty palace of blue lapis. Sometimes she appears as a savage, lion-headed woman suckling cubs, or on a boat peering wistfully across the river that separates the land of the living from her own realm, called Irkalla, or the House of Dust. In the Descent myth, Eresh Kagal is described first as enraged due to Inanna's invasion of her realm, secondly as actively destructive, third as suffering, and finally as grateful and generous. Sylvia Britton Pereira comments in The Descent to Goddess her examination of the Inanna myth. There is a quality of primal rage about her. She is full of fury, greed, and the fear of loss, and even of self spite. Though the shadow self has hidden positive qualities, she shrouds them in loss and rage that the heroine of light must battle through to absorb. The shadow loathes the heroine, who has all the youth, beauty, and advantages of the upper world, thus her rejection of this lighter self. And to me, Daenerys' good qualities are the lighter self that Cersei rejects about herself. She is a source of endless misery, trapped in the underworld, unable to feast with the gods or follow her lover when he abandons her for better things. She sobs in pain, abandoned by the gods to this lifeless underworld. Inanna, through suffering, has come to understand her sister's loss and misery. Inanna too has suffered death now. She has learned that her impulses and arrogance have consequences. When she embraces Ereshkigal, they reintegrate, each gaining wisdom from the other. The story of Daenerys and Cersei is one of two queens trying to navigate a world that wasn't built for them. It's a story of pain and suffering, but it's also a story of perseverance. It's about a system that cares nothing for girls. Yes, one person here is the villain and the other is a hero, but that doesn't change that these characters are meant to be viewed as something so much more than that. In the words of Ursula K. Le Guin, life rises out of death, death rises out of life. In being opposite, they yearn to each other. They give birth to each other and are forever reborn. And with them, all is reborn. The flower of the apple tree, the light of the stars. In life is death. In death is rebirth. What then is life without death? Life unchanging, everlasting, eternal. What is it but death? Death without rebirth. If you stayed this long, thank you for watching. Sorry it took me like a billion years to get this video done. ADHD is a plague. I cannot erase it. But please look at the art credits, look up every single one of these artists. I think the artists of this fandom are the lifeblood. Thank you for watching.